Imps are unique in that they appear to exist all over Hell, whereas most species seem to be from one ring in particular. So today I want to talk about why exactly that is, and all the differences between the different Imp societies and how they evolved this way. My name is Deepcut, hit that subscribe button, and let's dive in. There are, of course, 7 rings of Hell in Helluva Boss, and with them being stacked on top of each other, it requires a sort of elevator metro system to travel between the rings. With that in mind, most species were isolated to develop in a single ring before more and more modern ways came about for the species to travel and they could intermix. Imps, as the lowest of the low of Hell, are almost a slave class in the modern era and likely were more overtly enslaved in earlier times. I imagine that they did in fact start their existence in the Wrath Ring, but that unlike the other species, the Imp would be more convenient to ship all over Hell, whether to do work for overlords and royalty or to engage in actual warfare with the natives of Hell in the early times of its existence, with the Imps perhaps being used to conquer the rings as a whole. However they ended up in these different locations, they'd slowly start to evolve in different ways, particularly before the more recent easy transportation systems that exist that allow Imps to intermix with those from other rings. The Wrath Ring Imps can be pretty diverse in terms of how they look, but as a general rule, they are shorter than the Imps that Stolas is used to. Stolas seems to have an interest in the taller Imps in general, and even Imps in Imp City of the Pride Ring tend to be on the shorter side as well. Now, after leaving Wrath, certain Imp groups may have naturally evolved to be more tall as a whole, but one of the largest factors in how different Imp breeds look from one another seems to do with how they mix with the other local species in each ring. We can see throughout the series that certain demons appear to be half of one species and half of another, with Striker being a notable speaking example. While these examples tend to be first-generation mixed species, the Imps we see in different rings today are the outcome of who knows how many generations of mixed breeding with the local species of each ring, with it mostly favoring the side of the Imps. The Imps in the Lust Ring are probably the most notable example of how the local species of a ring have affected an Imp species. In the Lust Ring, we see several examples of Imps who appear to be part succubus, but not so much so that they appear to be a perfect split of succubus and Imp. Instead, these Imps are taller, more muscular, have a general sexy vibe to them, and even have wings. Despite this, they appear to elsewise be much closer to Imps and are likely still classed as such. I imagine these Imps to be the descendants of a first wave of Imps that came into the Lust Ring, which could have been as a general workforce to help with whatever the Lust Ring needed, or it could have been, as theorized earlier, an invasion of Imps on behalf of the 7 princes in Hell's early history as they tried to conquer and control the 7 rings, this being the warfare that Moxie alludes to in episode 5 and how angelic weaponry has changed it. Regardless of how they got there, generations of half-succubus, half-imp children would inevitably be born, with them mostly reproducing with imps in the future, creating an imp subspecies that is taller and more succubus-like, while still being clearly in the imp family, as opposed to a succubus with a few vaguely imp features. In Hell's society, the deciding factor for whether or not a mixed species becomes a subspecies of one or the other likely comes down to the horns if the character is part imp. In Succubus, horns are black-tipped for both male and females, but in Imps we of course know that men have horns with thick black and white stripes, whereas women have black horns with tiny white stripes. The existence of these horns on a mixed species likely caused the other species of Hell to immediately classify them as Imps. Not that they would get kicked out of a community of their other species they are a mix of, but they give these species a very unique difference from mixed species that don't include Imps, with how this trait continues to pattern itself based off of gender in a way that the other species don't have. In other rings of Hell, tall Imps appear to exist as well, but not as much with the features common to other species. These taller Imps may have been married into height, so to speak, with minimal cross-mixing with other species, where the only trait retained from a taller species over many generations would be their height. Blitz is of course among the taller Imps that we've seen from the series, and while he does appear to be from Pride, there's also been little hints that he is from Greed. Blitz was raised in Pride, that is something we can see in his flashbacks, but he appears to have moved here along with a lot of Imps shortly after the creation of Imp City back in the 1980s. As far as I can infer, this city was built up for the Imps to be the legions of demons that serve under Stolas as described in the real-life Ars Goetia. These imps may have existed throughout all of the Pride Ring and made their way here thinking they were finally being given their own city for them to create a system that works for them, only to have it really be built for largely businesses that cater to the overlords with missions to Earth, with Blitz's entire building apparently being in that line of work. There is even an entire floor just for Succubus, which is why Vraska had to work on the same floor as IMP in episode 3, because there was no more room on the sucking floor. One way we may be able to tell where Blitz is from is the different patterns we might see in his horns versus the horns of imps from other rings. When it comes to the Greed Ring, my focus for this theory will be on the imps in the Greed Ring that we know to be in some sort of mafia. While there are other imps around, and there is always some diversity to how these imps are presented, mafia imps are just a great example of imps we know to be in the Greed Ring, living a greed lifestyle that appears to be passed down from generation to generation if Crimson is any indication, as opposed to some of the people we see in the background of Lululand who may be from the Greed Ring, but may also be from other rings, as we see a lot of these characters traveling around from one ring to another in the various episodes. When Moxie fights a rival gang of imps in a flashback, undoubtedly locals to the Greed Ring, they appear to have horns growing from more so the sides of their head. Something we also see in the Mafia imps that the gang flies past in the beginning of the episode, both examples making a bit of a U-shaped pattern with their horns. The local female imps appear in episode 2 of season 1, where we can see what appears to be a gang of cross-dressing women stalking Stolas. With horns I'd say have thicker white stripes than usual for female imps, with horn shapes closer to Blitz's but not nearly as big. Crimson, of course, does not fall into this pattern with his horns, but there is always diversity to how the imps look everywhere in Hell, whether because some are constantly traveling imp characters that we see in every episode, or others are just locals who have their own differently shaped horns. Blitz's horns are noticeably larger than most people's, and his father, Buxo, had even crazier horns that began to really twist around in his old age. While Millie and a lot of female imps tend to have smaller and less curved horns, Blitz's sister Barbie Wire has even more twisted horns than Blitz. With Buxo having a family circus, I imagine a lot of the imps of the circus to be distantly related from him, or from the same sort of tribes of imp that he came from, together to form the circus. Their horns tend to be wild and crazy and more diverse than other subspecies of imp, something that may have contributed to their decision to start a circus with Buxo, as these imps are a bit more wild-looking to even other imps. Outside of the circus, we see this pattern best in Wally Wackford. Wally is one of the imps who recur across all of the rings, doing whatever he can to make money. He first appeared in Lululand selling inconvenient torches, but has also appeared in the Pride Ring as well as Lust. Interestingly, he also knows Blitz by the name Blitz-O, indicating that he has a past with Blitz the same way other characters like Vraska and Fizzarali do when they emphasize the O in his name. His twisted horns and circus-like performances give the impression that he may be from the same subspecies of imp that Blitz and his father descend from as well, with Wally's home seeming to be in the Pride Ring in Imp City. It is likely that Pride imps as a whole were very involved with the circus industry before it inevitably died out. Buxo seemed entrepreneurial with his own little imp-run circus, but we know Pride to be ruled by Lucifer, who treats all of Hell like one giant circus and seems to love that as part of his personal theme. He's known for his cell phone app Lucy Master, which is used to purchase tickets to events and attractions, such as his theme park Lulu World, which Lululand in the Greed Ring is a ripoff of, as well as the musical concerts of his wife Lilith. Before the modernizations of theme parks, Lucifer likely focused almost exclusively on circus-type attractions, making a performance out of Hell and its demons. There are of course more rings to explore in Helluva, such as Gluttony, Envy, and Sloth, but until we see those rings for ourselves, it's hard to say how exactly those imps might look, if there are even imps there at all. But what do you guys think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and I'll see you next time.